My name is Marion, and I want to tell you about something that happened to me in our big city. It's a story about being smart when people think you're not looking. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me. That's where my husband David used to sit every morning, reading his newspaper and drinking his coffee. But David wasn't there anymore. He had moved out 2 days ago. The smell of his aftershave still floated in the air. It made me feel sad and angry at the same time. You know that feeling when someone takes your favorite toy and you can't get it back? That's how I felt, except David wasn't my toy. He was supposed to be my partner for life. 2 days ago, he came back to get the last of his things. That's what he said. He packed his clothes, his books, and even his favorite coffee mug. The blue one with a chip on the handle that I always told him to throw away. But here's the strange part. David didn't seem sad at all. He was almost happy. When he was leaving, he turned around at the front door and smiled at me. Not a nice smile, but a sneaky one. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer soon, Marion," he said. Then he walked away, whistling like he had just won a prize at the carnival. I sat there in my quiet kitchen, looking at that empty chair. The morning sun came through the window and made a bright square on the table, right where his newspaper used to be. Everything looked the same, but everything felt different. Our house felt too big and too quiet. We had lived here for 15 years. We painted the walls together. We planted the garden together. We even fixed the leaky sink together, though David wasn't very good with tools and we had to call a real repair person anyway. Now I was alone. I got up and made myself some toast. Just one piece because that's all I needed now. When David lived here, I always made 2 pieces. One for me and one for him. It's funny how you don't notice little things like that until they change. As I ate my breakfast, I wondered what David meant about his lawyer. Was he going to try to take our house, our car, our savings account? I had worked just as hard as David during our marriage. I had a job at the library in town, helping people find books and teaching children how to read. David worked at a big office building downtown, doing something with computers and numbers. We both worked hard, and we both helped pay for everything we owned together. But David seemed to think he could just walk away and take whatever he wanted. He seemed to think I was just a silly woman who didn't understand money or laws or important grown-up things. That's where David made his first big mistake. You see, I might work at a library, but that means I read a lot of books. I read books about everything: cooking, gardening, history, and yes, even books about money and laws. David never paid attention to what I was reading. He thought I just read romance novels and fairy tales. He was wrong about that, just like he was wrong about a lot of things. As I finished my toast, I heard the mailman's truck stop in front of our house. I went to get the mail, hoping maybe there would be a letter from my sister who lives in another state, or maybe a catalog with pretty pictures to look at. But instead I found something that made my heart beat fast and my hands shake a little. It was an envelope with my friend Sarah's return address. Sarah and I had been friends since we were little girls. We grew up on the same street and went to the same school. Even though we both got married and moved to different parts of the city, we still called each other and met for coffee sometimes. But this wasn't Sarah's usual kind of letter. This envelope felt thick, like there was something inside besides just a regular letter. I took the mail back to my kitchen table, back to that spot across from the empty chair, and opened Sarah's envelope. Inside was a letter and a photograph. The photograph made me gasp out loud, even though no one was there to hear me. The photograph showed David and a woman I remembered from long, long ago. Her name was Claire, and she had been David's girlfriend when they were teenagers in high school. That was before David and I met, before we fell in love, before we got married. But in this picture, David and Claire were not teenagers. They were grown-ups just like now. And they were holding hands and smiling at each other like they were in love. David was wearing his favorite blue shirt, the one I bought him for his birthday last year. Claire was wearing a pretty red dress and had her hair done all fancy, like she was going to a party. But the worst part was where they were standing. They were in front of Tony's Italian restaurant, the same place where David took me for our anniversary dinner every year. The same place where he proposed to me 15 years ago. The same place where we celebrated every important moment in our lives together. Sarah's letter explained everything. Dear Marion, I'm so sorry to show you this, but I think you need to know. My cousin Lisa works at Tony's restaurant, and she saw David there yesterday with this woman. Lisa said they were acting like boyfriend and girlfriend, holding hands and kissing. David told the waiter it was their new beginning celebration. I thought you should know what's really going on. Please call me if you need to talk. Love, Sarah. I put the letter and photograph down on the table. My hands were shaking and I felt like I might cry. But then I felt something else growing inside me. Something stronger than sadness. Felt angry. Not just regular angry, but the kind of angry that makes you think clearly and plan carefully. David didn't just leave me. He left me for someone from his past. Someone he probably never stopped thinking about during our whole marriage. And he was already acting like I didn't exist, like our 15 years together meant nothing at all. I was still looking at that photograph when the phone rang. The caller ID said it was from David's work. The big office building downtown where he spent most of his days. Hello, answered Mrs. Peterson. This is Janet from Human Resources at Morrison & Associates. I'm calling about some paperwork we received from your husband. My heart started beating faster. What kind of paperwork? Well, Mr. Peterson submitted a request to change the beneficiary on his pension account. He wants to remove you and add someone named Claire Mitchell as the primary beneficiary. But since this is a joint marital account, we need both signatures before we can make any changes. Can you come in this week to sign the forms? I felt like someone had poured ice water down my back. David was trying to take away my right to his pension money. The money we had saved together for when we got old. He wanted to give it all to Claire instead. Mrs. Peterson. Are you still there? Yes, I'm here, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Can you tell me more about these forms? Of course. Your husband seems to think this will be a simple process, but our legal department needs to review everything first. These kinds of changes can take several weeks to process, especially with joint accounts. Several weeks. That gave me time to think. I'll need to review the paperwork before I sign anything, I told Janet. Can you mail me copies? Absolutely. I'll send them today. And Mrs. Peterson. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call. These financial decisions are very important. After I hung up the phone, I sat back in my chair and looked at that photograph again. David and Claire, smiling and happy, celebrating their new beginning, while trying to take away the future I had worked so hard to build. But here's what David didn't know. And what Claire certainly didn't know. I knew something about that pension account that David had forgotten. Something very important that happened 3 years ago when David almost lost his job. You see, 3 years ago, David's company was having money troubles. They were firing people and cutting salaries. David was so worried he might lose his job that he couldn't sleep at night. He would pace around our house, worrying about money and our future. That's when I had an idea. I walked to our home office and opened the filing cabinet where we kept all our important papers. Behind the folders marked house and insurance and taxes, I found the folder I was looking for. The one marked retirement. Inside that folder was a paper that David had completely forgotten about. But I remembered it perfectly. 3 years ago, when David was so worried about losing his job, I spent many evenings at the library reading books about money and retirement accounts. I wanted to help protect our future just in case something bad happened. That's when I learned about something called a joint marital trust. It's like a special safe where married people can put their retirement money, and both people have to agree before anyone can take money out. I brought the idea home to David one night when he was sitting in his chair, looking worried and tired. David, I had said, I think I found a way to protect your pension money, even if something happens to your job. He looked up from his newspaper. What do you mean? Well, if you move your retirement savings into a joint marital trust, the company can't touch it even if they fire you. It's completely separate and protected. David's eyes got bright with hope. That sounds great. But how does it work? We both have to sign papers, and one of us becomes the administrator. That person controls when money can be taken out. You do it, Marion, David had said quickly. You're better with paperwork than I am. I trust you completely. So we went to see a lawyer, and David signed papers moving all his retirement money into the trust. I became the administrator, which meant I was the only person who could approve taking money out of the account. At the time, David thought it was wonderful. He hugged me and said, "You're so smart, Marion. You saved our future." But that was 3 years ago. Now David had forgotten all about it. He thought that because he moved out of our house, he could just take control of his money again. He didn't remember that legally, I was still the administrator of the trust. That meant David couldn't change the beneficiary without my signature. He couldn't take money out without my approval. He couldn't give Claire access to anything without me agreeing to it first. David had walked away thinking he was so clever, but he had forgotten the most important thing of all. I sat there in our office, holding that legal paper in my hands. For the first time since David left, I smiled a real smile. But I wasn't going to tell David about this right away. No, that would be too easy. First, I wanted to see exactly what he was planning. I wanted to know just how sneaky he thought he could be. I decided to call my friend Grace, who was a lawyer. Grace and I had met at a book club at the library. She was smart and kind, and she always gave good advice. "Grace," I said when she answered the phone, "I need some legal help. Can we meet for coffee?" "Of course, Marion. Is everything okay? You sound upset." "David left me," I said simply. "And now he's trying to take all our money and give it to his old girlfriend." Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Bring all your financial papers, Marion. Let's see what we're dealing with." We met the next day at the coffee shop downtown, the one with the big windows and comfortable chairs. I brought my folder of retirement papers, and Grace brought her briefcase full of legal books. Grace read through all my papers very carefully. Sometimes she would nod, sometimes she would frown, and sometimes she would write notes on a yellow pad. Finally, she looked up at me and smiled. "Marion, do you realize what you have here?" "I think so, but I want to make sure I understand it right. You are the sole administrator of a joint marital trust containing approximately $400,000. That's David's entire pension and retirement savings. And according to these papers, he cannot access a single penny without your written approval. $400,000. I had never really thought about how much money that was. Sounded like a fortune. So what does that mean? Yes. It means David can't give Claire anything. He can't change beneficiaries. He can't take early withdrawals. He can't do anything with that money until your divorce is finalized. And even then, only if you agree to it. Grace leaned forward and lowered her voice. "Marion, your husband just made the biggest mistake of his life. He left you holding all the cards, and he doesn't even know it." Grace stirred her coffee and looked at me with serious eyes. "Marion, I need to give you some important advice. Don't let David know what you know. Not yet." "What do you mean?" "Right now, David thinks he's winning. He thinks he can just walk away and take everything with him. Let him keep thinking that for a while." "But why?" Grace smiled. "Because when people think they're winning, they get careless. They make mistakes. And we want David to make as many mistakes as possible before we show him the truth." I understood what Grace meant. It was like when I played chess with my nephew Tommy. If I let him think he was about to win, he would get so excited that he would stop paying attention. Then I could surprise him with a move he never saw coming. So what should I do? Wait and watch. Let David think you're just a sad, helpless woman who doesn't understand money. Let him get confident. And whatever you do, don't sign anything until we talk about it first. I went home feeling stronger than I had in days. I had a plan now, and I had a good lawyer helping me. All I had to do was be patient and let David make his mistakes. I didn't have to wait very long. The next morning my phone rang. It was David. "Marion," he said in a fake nice voice. "I hope you're doing okay." I wanted to tell him exactly what I thought about him and Claire and their new beginning celebration. But instead, I remembered Grace's advice. I'm managing, I said quietly, trying to sound sad and confused. Good. Listen, I'm sure you got some papers from my work about the pension account. I know all this legal stuff is probably confusing for you, so I thought I'd help explain it. David was talking to me like I was a little child who didn't understand big words. It made me angry, but I kept my voice soft and uncertain. Yes, I got some papers. They looked very complicated. Don't worry about it, David said cheerfully. All you have to do is sign them, and I'll take care of everything else. It's just paperwork to make the divorce easier. Divorce. He was already talking about divorce like it was no big deal, like our 15 years of marriage was just an old magazine he was throwing away. I don't know, David. Maybe I should have a lawyer look at them first. Oh, Marion, you don't need to waste money on a lawyer. This is all very simple. I'll come over tomorrow evening and we can take care of it together. Just like old times. Just like old times. As if he hadn't left me for another woman. As if he wasn't trying to steal our retirement money. Okay, I said, making my voice sound small and grateful. That would be helpful. Great. I'll see you tomorrow at 7. And Marion, thank you for being so reasonable about all this. I know this must be hard for you. After I hung up, I called Grace right away. He wants to come over tomorrow to get me to sign papers, I told her. Perfect, Grace said. This is exactly what we hoped would happen. David is so confident that he's not even trying to be sneaky about it. So what do I do? Let him come over. Let him explain the papers to you. Act confused and a little scared. And whatever you do, don't sign anything. Tell him you need time to think about it. Won't he get suspicious? Maybe a little. But men like David expect women like you to be hesitant about big decisions. He'll probably think you're just being emotional and scared, not smart and strategic. That evening, I practiced looking confused in the bathroom mirror. I practiced sounding helpless and uncertain. It wasn't easy because I was feeling stronger and smarter than I had felt in years. The next day dragged by slowly. I cleaned the house, not because David deserved a clean house, but because I wanted everything to be perfect for what Grace called the performance. At exactly 7 o'clock, David knocked on the front door. When I opened it, I was surprised to see that Claire was with him. She was even prettier in person than in the photograph, with shiny blonde hair and perfect makeup. Hello, Marion, David said, walking into our house like he still lived there. I hope you don't mind that I brought Claire. She wanted to meet you. Claire smiled at me, but it wasn't a real smile. It was the kind of smile people give you when they feel sorry for you, like you're a sad old dog at the animal shelter. Hi, Marion, Claire said in a voice that sounded like honey. David has told me so much about you. I hope we can all be friends during this difficult time. I wanted to laugh. Here was the woman who stole my husband standing in my kitchen, talking about being friends. But I remembered Grace's advice and just nodded politely. Please sit down, I said, gesturing toward the kitchen table. Can I get you some coffee? That would be lovely, Claire said, settling into David's old chair like she belonged there. I made coffee for all three of us, even though my hands wanted to shake with anger. Claire sat in David's chair like she owned it, and David spread papers all over my kitchen table like he was still the man of the house. Now, Marion, David said, putting on his reading glasses, let me explain what these papers are for. He pointed to the first page. This form transfers control of my pension account back to me. See? It says right here that you give up all rights to make decisions about the money. I looked at the paper and pretended to read it carefully, even though I already knew it was exactly what Grace said it would be. And this one, David continued, flipping to the second page. This one says you agree that Claire can be my new beneficiary. That means if something happens to me, she gets the money instead of you. Claire reached over and patted David's hand. It's just a formality, Marion. David and I are planning our future together now. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. They were sitting at my table in my kitchen, calmly talking about taking away money I had helped save for 15 years. And they were acting like it was no big deal, like I should just smile and say, okay. But I remembered Grace's words. Let them get confident. Let them make mistakes. So I picked up the papers and pretended to read them very slowly, moving my lips a little bit like I was having trouble understanding the big words. This is all very confusing, I said, making my voice sound worried. What does this word mean? I pointed to beneficiary. David sighed like I was a slow student in his class. A beneficiary is the person who gets the money, Marion. It's not that complicated. Claire leaned forward with her fake sweet smile. Marion, honey, you don't need to worry about understanding all the details. David will take care of everything. You just need to sign your name. They were both treating me like I was stupid. Like I was too dumb to understand my own money. This made me angrier than anything else they had done. But instead of getting mad, I got smarter. I put the papers down and looked at David with big, confused eyes. David, I don't understand something. I thought we put your pension money in some kind of special account a few years ago. When you were worried about losing your job. For just a second, David looked confused. I could see him trying to remember. Then his face cleared, and he waved his hand like he was brushing away a fly. Oh, that old thing. Don't worry about that, Marion. That was just temporary. These new papers will fix everything. But I saw something in David's eyes that told me the truth. He didn't really remember the details about the trust. He just remembered that we did something and he assumed it wasn't important anymore. This was exactly what Grace had predicted. David was so confident, so sure that I was helpless, that he wasn't being careful. Are you sure I should sign this? I asked, trying to sound like a worried wife. It seems like a lot of money to just give up. Claire's smile got a little less sweet. Marion, David is trying to be fair with you. He could make this much more difficult if he wanted to. Was that a threat? I looked at Claire more carefully. Under all that pretty makeup and blonde hair, she looked mean. Like a cat who was pretending to be nice until she could scratch you. David reached over and patted my hand, the same way Claire had patted his. Marion, you know I would never hurt you. We're just trying to make this divorce as easy as possible for everyone. Divorce. There was that word again. He said it so easily, like he was talking about changing TV channels. I know, David. This is scary for me. All these legal words and numbers. What if I make a mistake? David and Claire looked at each other. I could see them having a silent conversation with their eyes. Claire raised her eyebrows like she was asking a question. David shook his head slightly like he was saying, "Don't worry." Then David turned back to me with his biggest, fakest smile. Tell you what, Marion. Why don't you take tonight to think about it? But don't take too long, okay? My lawyer says we need to get this paperwork filed by the end of the week. His lawyer. Of course, David had already hired a lawyer. Probably an expensive one who would help him take everything and leave me with nothing. That's very nice of you, David, I said in my smallest, most grateful voice. I'll think about it tonight and call you tomorrow. David and Claire stood up to leave. Claire came around the table and gave me a hug that felt like hugging a snake. You're being very mature about this, Marion, she whispered in my ear. David is lucky to have such an understanding ex-wife. Ex-wife. Not even soon-to-be ex-wife. In Claire's mind, I was already gone. After they left, I sat at my kitchen table looking at those papers. David had forgotten to take them with him. Maybe he thought I was too stupid to understand them without his help. I picked up my phone and called Grace. How did it go? Grace asked. Even better than we hoped, I said. David has completely forgotten about the trust. And Grace. He brought Claire with him. She's even worse than I imagined. Perfect, Grace said. Now we know exactly who we're dealing with. Tomorrow we start phase 2 of our plan. The next morning I met Grace at her office downtown. Her office was on the 10th floor of a tall building, with big windows that looked out over the whole city. It made me feel important and strong, sitting in that fancy chair across from Grace's desk. Okay, Marion, Grace said, opening a thick folder. Yesterday proved that David has no idea what legal situation he's actually in. Now we're going to use that against him. What do you mean? Grace pulled out a sheet of paper and showed it to me. This is a copy of the trust document you and David signed 3 years ago. I've had my legal assistant review it very carefully. David cannot touch that pension money without your written permission. Not one penny. I looked at the paper again. Even though I had read it before, seeing it in Grace's official office made it feel more real and more powerful. But what about those papers David brought over? He seemed so sure they would work. Grace laughed. Those papers are basically worthless. David can file them all he wants, but they can't override the trust agreement. It's like trying to sell a house when someone else holds the deed. You can write up all the sales contracts you want, but you still can't actually sell the house. That made sense to me. So what's our next step? We're going to let David file those useless papers. We're going to let him think everything is going according to his plan. And while he's celebrating his victory, we're going to gather evidence of exactly what he's trying to do. Grace opened another folder. I have a friend who works in the legal department at David's company. She's going to keep track of any requests David makes about his pension account. If he tries to change beneficiaries or request early withdrawals, we'll know about it. Is that legal? Absolutely. It's all public record once he files the requests. We're just making sure we stay informed. Grace leaned back in her chair. Marian, I need to ask you something important. What do you want to get out of this situation? Do you want David back? Do you want to punish him? Do you want to protect your financial future? All of the above. I thought about that question for a long time. A few days ago I might have said I wanted David back. I might have been willing to forgive him and pretend none of this ever happened. But now, after seeing him with Claire, after watching them sit in my kitchen and calmly plan to steal my future, it felt different. I don't want David back, I said slowly. He made his choice. But I do want to protect myself. And I want him to understand that I'm not the stupid, helpless woman he thinks I am. Grace smiled. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Now, here's what we're going to do. She pulled out a calendar and pointed to Friday. David said his lawyer wants those papers filed by the end of the week, right? So by Friday, David will have filed all his requests with his company. He'll think everything is taken care of. Then what? Then we wait. We let David and Claire start making plans with money they can't actually access. We let them get excited about their new life together. And when they're feeling most confident, most secure, that's when we show them the truth. Grace's plan sounded perfect, but I was still worried about one thing. What if David remembers about the trust before then? What if he figures out that I still have control? That's a risk, Grace admitted. But based on what you told me about yesterday, David is so focused on getting you to sign those papers that he's not thinking clearly about anything else. And men like David hate admitting they made mistakes or forgot important things. Even if he starts to remember, his pride will probably stop him from looking into it too carefully. I hoped Grace was right. David had always been too proud to admit when he was wrong about something. Maybe that pride would work in our favor this time. So what do I do while we're waiting? Act sad and confused. If David calls, sound like you're struggling with a decision. Make him think you might sign the papers but you need more time. The longer we can keep him confident and distracted, the better. I left Grace's office feeling like a secret agent in a movie. I had a mission now and I had a plan. For the first time since David left, I felt like I was the one in control. That afternoon, David called just like Grace predicted he would. Marian, have you thought about those papers? I took a deep breath and made my voice sound shaky and uncertain. Yes, David, I've been thinking about them all day. It's so hard for me to understand everything. What don't you understand? I thought I explained everything yesterday. Well, I keep wondering. What will happen to me after you take control of the pension money? I mean, what if I need help when I get old? What if I get sick? There was a pause. I could almost hear David's brain working, trying to figure out how to answer without sounding mean. Marian, you'll be fine. You have your job at the library. You can take care of yourself. My job at the library. I made about 1/4 of what David made at his office job. David knew that, but he was pretending it didn't matter. I suppose you're right, I said, trying to sound like I was convincing myself. When do you need me to sign the papers? How about tomorrow evening? I can come over around 7 again. Will Claire be coming too? Another pause. Would that bother you? Oh no, I lied. She seems very nice. I'm sure you two will be very happy together. Thanks, Marian. I really appreciate how mature you're being about all this. After I hung up, I called Grace to report on the conversation. Perfect, Grace said. He's walking right into our trap. By tomorrow night, David will be so confident that he won't be watching for any surprises. What kind of surprises? Grace's voice sounded mysterious and a little bit scary. The kind that teach people not to underestimate librarians. The next day passed slowly. I went to work at the library like always, helping people find books and teaching children how to read. But inside I felt like I was buzzing with electricity. Tonight, David would come to get my signature on those useless papers. Tonight he would think he had won everything. But he had no idea what was really about to happen. At 5 o'clock, Grace called me at the library just before I left work. Marian, my friend at David's company, just called me with some very interesting news. What kind of news? David filed all his paperwork today, just like we thought he would. But he also did something else. Something very foolish. My heart started beating faster. What did he do? He left a voicemail for his benefits manager. And Marian. He said some things that are going to get him in big trouble. Grace's voice sounded excited and a little bit angry at the same time. In the voicemail, David said, and I quote, "Once my wife is out of the way, I want everything moved into Claire's name. She's my real family now, and she deserves to have financial security." I felt like someone had poured hot soup in my stomach. He said I needed to be out of the way. Those were his exact words. And Marian, that's not just mean, it's actually illegal. He's talking about deliberately hiding marital assets from his wife during divorce proceedings. That's called financial fraud. I sat down in one of the library chairs because my legs felt wobbly. David wasn't just being mean or selfish. He was actually breaking the law. But there's more, Grace continued. My friend also told me that David has been meeting with some kind of financial advisor. Someone who supposedly helps people move money around quickly during divorces. What does that mean? It means David and Claire are planning to take that pension money and hide it where you can't find it. They think they can make it disappear before the divorce is final. Now I felt angry again, but it was a cold, clear kind of angry. The kind that helps you think straight and plan carefully. Grace, what do we do now? We stick to our plan, but we also gather evidence. I want you to record your conversation with David tonight. Use your phone. Most phones can record calls now. Record our conversation. Is that legal? In our state, yes, as long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded. And that person is you. Grace gave me instructions on how to use my phone to record. It was easier than I thought it would be. You just pressed a button and the phone would remember everything that was said. Remember, Marian, let David talk as much as possible. Let him explain his plans. Let him brag about how clever he's being. The more he says, the more evidence we have. I went home and practiced using the recording app on my phone until I was sure I knew how it worked. Then I made a simple dinner and waited for 7 o'clock. At exactly 7, David knocked on my door. This time he was alone. "Where's Claire?" I asked as I let him in. David grinned. "She's at home packing. We're going on a little vacation next week to celebrate." "Celebrate what?" "Our new beginning, of course." David sat down at my kitchen table and spread out the papers again. "Once you sign these tonight, everything will be settled. Claire and I can start planning our future properly." I sat down across from him and secretly turned on the recording app on my phone. My heart was beating so loud I was afraid David would hear it, but he was too busy looking at his papers. "David, I have to ask you something," I said, trying to sound worried and confused. What exactly happens to the money after I sign these papers? David looked up at me with that same fake patient expression he'd been using all week. Marian, I told you yesterday. I take control of my pension account, and Claire becomes my beneficiary. It's very simple. But where does the money go in the meantime? While we're getting divorced, I mean. David's eyes got a little brighter, like he was excited to explain something clever. Well, since you asked, I've been working with a financial advisor. He's helping me move everything into a special kind of account that's more flexible. What kind of account? The kind that can't be touched by divorce lawyers, David said with a proud smile. The kind that protects assets from being divided up unfairly. My phone was recording every word. David was telling me exactly how he planned to hide our money from me. That sounds very smart, I said, making my voice sound impressed. This financial advisor must be very good at his job. Oh, he is. He's helped lots of men protect their assets during divorces. He says that as soon as you sign these papers and I get control back, we can have everything transferred within 48 hours. By the time your lawyer figures out what happened, it'll be too late. David was so proud of his sneaky plan that he couldn't stop talking about it. He told me all about how the money would be moved to different accounts, how Claire's name would be put on everything, and how I would never be able to prove that the money had ever been ours together. The best part, David said, leaning forward like he was telling me a secret, is that legally you'll have agreed to all of it by signing these papers. He pushed the papers toward me and held out a pen. So, Marian, are you ready to sign? I looked at the pen in David's hand. For a moment I almost felt sorry for him. He had no idea what was about to happen. He thought he was so smart, so clever, but he was actually walking straight into a trap. I reached for the pen, and David's face lit up with a big, happy smile. But instead of taking the pen, I reached into my purse and pulled out a different set of papers. Papers that Grace had prepared for me that morning. David, I said in a voice that was no longer soft or confused, before I sign anything, I think you should look at these. David's smile faded a little bit. What are those? These are copies of the joint marital trust documents that we signed 3 years ago. You remember, don't you? When you were worried about losing your job. I watched David's face change as he looked at the papers. First confusion, then recognition, then something that looked like fear. I remember something about that, he said slowly. But that was just temporary, right? Just until the job situation got better. No, David. It wasn't temporary. According to these legal documents, I am the sole administrator of your entire pension account. That means you can't change the beneficiary. You can't withdraw money. You can't transfer funds. You can't do anything with that $400,000 without my written permission. David stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. That can't be right. My HR department said. Your HR department was trying to be helpful, but they can't override a legal trust agreement. Those papers you wanted me to sign. They're completely worthless. I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter where I had left my phone. I picked it up and showed David the recording app that was still running. Also, David, I've been recording our entire conversation tonight, including the part where you told me about your plan to hide marital assets with your financial advisor, including the part where you said you wanted to get me out of the way, so Claire could have my money. David's face went completely white. You recorded me? Without telling me? It's perfectly legal in our state. And now I have proof that you were planning to commit financial fraud during our divorce proceedings. David jumped up from his chair so fast that it fell over backwards. Marian, you don't understand. This is all a misunderstanding. I wasn't trying to cheat you. You were just what, David? Just trying to steal $400,000 from me. Just trying to give my retirement money to your girlfriend. Just trying to leave me with nothing after 15 years of marriage. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt completely in control. I felt strong and smart and powerful. David started pacing around my kitchen like a trapped animal. Okay. Maybe I made some mistakes. Maybe I should have explained things better. But we can work this out, can't we? We can figure out a fair way to split everything. Oh, David, I said, and now I was the one smiling. It's much too late for that. Just then there was a knock at the front door. David looked confused, but I wasn't surprised at all. This was part of Grace's plan. Excuse me for a moment, I said politely, and went to answer the door. It was Grace, carrying her lawyer briefcase and wearing her most professional suit. Good evening, Marion, Grace said loudly enough for David to hear. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. David appeared in the doorway behind me, looking panicked. Who is this? David, I said sweetly. I'd like you to meet Grace Martinez, my attorney. Grace, this is my husband David, and he was just telling me all about his plans to hide our marital assets. Grace smiled at David the way a cat smiles at a mouse. How interesting. I'd love to hear more about those plans. David looked like he wanted to run away, but Grace stepped into the house and closed the door behind her. Mr. Peterson, Grace said in her official lawyer voice, I think we need to have a serious conversation about your legal situation. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. I have here copies of your voicemail to your benefits manager, documents showing your meetings with questionable financial advisors, and a recording of tonight's conversation where you admit to planning financial fraud. David's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I want to call my lawyer. That's an excellent idea, Grace said. But first, let me explain what's going to happen. You have two choices, Mr. Peterson. Choice number 1. We can go to court where I will present all this evidence to a judge. The judge will not only deny your requests to control the pension account, but will also probably find you guilty of attempted financial fraud. That could mean jail time and heavy fines. David sank into one of my kitchen chairs. What's choice number 2? Grace smiled. Choice number 2 is that we settle this matter privately tonight. You agree to my client's terms, and we keep this unpleasant business out of the courts. What terms? David asked in a voice that sounded very small and scared. I sat down across from David and folded my hands on the table. For the first time in our entire marriage, David was listening to me with complete attention. Here are my terms, David. I looked at David sitting in that kitchen chair, looking smaller and more scared than I had ever seen him. This was the same man who had walked out of our house whistling, the same man who had brought his girlfriend to my kitchen table, the same man who had tried to steal my future. Now he was waiting to hear what I wanted from him. First, I said, speaking slowly and clearly, you will give up all claims to our joint savings account. All $28,000 stays with me. David opened his mouth to argue, but Grace held up her hand to stop him. Second, you will pay me a settlement of $50,000 from your personal accounts. Consider it payment for 15 years of cooking, cleaning, and taking care of you. $50,000. David squeaked. Marion, I don't have that kind of money just sitting around. Then you'll have to figure out how to get it, I said calmly. Maybe your new girlfriend can help you. Or maybe you can ask that financial advisor who is going to help you hide my money. Grace pulled more papers from her briefcase. These are the settlement documents, Mr. Peterson. Everything we're asking for is completely legal and very reasonable, considering what you were attempting to do. David looked at the papers like they might bite him. What about the pension account? What happens to that? Smiled. Oh, David, that's the best part. I'm keeping complete control of the pension account until I decide what to do with it. But that's my money. I worked for that money. Actually, Grace said, opening another folder, according to our state's laws about marital property, pension accounts earned during marriage belong to both spouses equally. Mrs. Peterson has every legal right to control her half of those assets. My half? David looked confused. That's right, I said. Half of $400,000 is $200,000. My half. And since I'm the administrator of the trust, I get to decide how and when any money comes out of that account. David was starting to understand just how trapped he was. So what are you saying? That I can never touch any of my pension money? I pretended to think about it for a moment. Well, I might consider approving small monthly payments. Like an allowance. Enough to help you pay rent on a small apartment somewhere. An allowance. David's voice cracked like he was a teenager again. You want to give me an allowance from my own pension? David, I said, leaning forward, you tried to steal $400,000 from me. You tried to leave me with nothing after 15 years of marriage. You brought your girlfriend into my house and asked me to sign papers that would have made me poor. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? Grace tapped her pen on the table. Mr. Peterson, these terms are very generous considering the evidence we have against you. If we go to court, you could end up with nothing at all, plus criminal charges. David looked back and forth between me and Grace like he was watching a tennis match. Finally, he slumped in his chair. What if I refuse? What if I just walk away and don't sign anything? Then we go to court tomorrow, Grace said cheerfully. I'll file all the evidence with the judge, including the recording from tonight where you admit to planning financial fraud. Your employer will probably fire you when they find out. Claire will probably leave you when she realizes you don't actually have any money to give her. And you'll still end up with no access to the pension account. I watched David think about all of this. I could almost see the thoughts spinning around in his head like clothes in a washing machine. How long do I have to decide? He asked quietly. Right now, I said. Grace has to file some papers with the court first thing tomorrow morning. Either she files a settlement agreement with your signature on it, or she files a complaint against you for attempted fraud. Your choice. David put his head in his hands. For a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered him sitting in this same kitchen 3 days ago, smiling and confident, explaining how he was going to take all our money and give it to Claire. I remembered him saying I needed to be out of the way. My sympathy disappeared completely. David, I said softly, you made your choice when you decided to leave me for Claire. You made your choice when you tried to steal my retirement money. Now you have to live with the consequences of those choices. David looked up at me, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I saw something real in his eyes. Not fake niceness, not manipulation, not overconfidence. Just sadness and regret. Marion, he said, I'm sorry. I really am. I don't know what I was thinking. You were thinking that I was stupid, I replied. You were thinking that I would just let you walk all over me. You were thinking that 15 years of marriage meant nothing as long as you could get what you wanted. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at our backyard where we used to have barbecues and plant flowers together. The sad thing, David, is that if you had just been honest with me, if you had just asked for a fair divorce, I probably would have been generous. I loved you for 15 years. I would have wanted you to be happy. I turned back to face him. But instead you tried to cheat me. You tried to leave me with nothing. And that, David, was the biggest mistake you ever made. David sat in that kitchen chair for what felt like a very long time. The clock on the wall tick-tocked loudly in the quiet room. Grace organized her papers. I stood by the window waiting. Finally, David lifted his head and looked at me. Where do I sign? He asked in a voice so quiet I almost couldn't hear it. Grace slid the settlement papers across the table. Here, here, and here, she said, pointing to the signature lines. David picked up the pen with shaking hands. For a moment, I thought he might change his mind and try to run away. But then he signed his name on all 3 papers. There, he said, putting the pen down. It's done. Grace gathered up the signed papers and put them back in her briefcase. Mr. Peterson, you have 30 days to pay the settlement amount to Mrs. Peterson's account. If you need payment arrangements, you can contact my office. David nodded without looking at either of us. He stood up slowly like an old man with sore bones. I guess I should go, he said. Yes, I said simply. You should. David walked toward the front door, then stopped and turned around. Marion, what are you going to tell people? About all this, I mean. I thought about his question. I'm going to tell them the truth, David. That you left me for your high school sweetheart, and I had to protect myself. David's shoulders sagged even more. What about Claire? Are you going to tell her what happened? David, I said, Claire is your problem now, not mine. But if I were you, I'd think very carefully about how you're going to explain why you suddenly don't have access to $400,000. David's face went pale again. I could tell he was just now realizing that Claire might not be very happy when she found out the truth. After David left, Grace and I sat at my kitchen table drinking tea and talking about what would happen next. How long will it take to make everything official? Yes. The settlement agreement goes into effect immediately, Grace said. The divorce papers will take a few more weeks to process, but your financial protection is already in place. And David really can't touch the pension money without my permission. Not one penny. And Marian, I have to tell you, what you did tonight was brilliant. You stayed calm, you gathered evidence, and you outmaneuvered someone who thought he was smarter than you. Smiled. I had a good lawyer helping me. Yes, but the smartest thing you did was think ahead 3 years ago when you suggested that trust. If you hadn't done that, David might have succeeded in taking everything. Grace packed up her briefcase and got ready to leave. What are you going to do now, Marian? How do you feel about all this? I thought about her question. I feel free, I said finally. For the first time in months, I feel like I can breathe again. Like I have control over my own life. After Grace left, I sat alone in my kitchen. But this time, looking at David's empty chair didn't make me sad. It made me feel peaceful. I walked around my house looking at everything with new eyes. This was my house now. My kitchen, my living room, my bedroom. I could paint the walls any color I wanted. I could rearrange the furniture. I could plant different flowers in the garden. I could do whatever made me happy. The next few weeks were very interesting. David managed to come up with the $50,000 for my settlement, though I heard from Sarah that he had to borrow money from his brother to do it. He moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Claire, as I had predicted, was not very happy when she found out that David didn't actually have access to his pension money. Sarah's cousin Lisa, who still worked at Tony's restaurant, told us that Claire and David had a very loud fight in the parking lot one evening. A few days after that fight, Sarah saw Claire having dinner at Tony's with a different man. Someone she had met at her new job, apparently. David tried calling me a few times in those first weeks. He wanted to apologize again or maybe ask me to reconsider the settlement terms. I don't know for sure because I didn't answer his calls. Grace had given me excellent advice. The best thing you can do now, Marian, is move forward with your life. Don't look back. So that's what I did. I used some of the settlement money to redecorate my house. I painted the living room a beautiful shade of blue that David had always said he hated. I bought new furniture for the bedroom and planted a vegetable garden in the backyard. I also did something I had been wanting to do for years. I signed up for college classes. I had always wanted to get a degree in library science, but David had said it was a waste of time and money. Now I could do whatever I wanted with my time and money. 6 months after that night in my kitchen, I was sitting at my same table, but everything was different. The chair across from me wasn't empty anymore. It had a stack of college textbooks on it, and my homework spread out next to my morning coffee. I was getting straight A's in all my classes. The doorbell rang and I went to answer it. It was Sarah, carrying a box of pastries from the bakery downtown. Coffee date? She asked with a smile. Always, I said, letting her into my bright, cheerful kitchen. As we sat drinking coffee and eating pastries, Sarah told me the latest news about David and Claire. Lisa says Claire moved out of David's apartment last week, Sarah said. Apparently, she found someone who actually has money. How is David doing? I asked, though I wasn't sure why I cared. Not great. He's been asking people if they know any lawyers who might help him get access to his pension account. But everyone keeps telling him the same thing, that the trust agreement is ironclad. He nodded. Grace said he could try to challenge it in court, but it would cost him more in legal fees than he could ever hope to get back. Sarah looked around my kitchen, taking in the new paint, the new curtains, and the college textbooks. Marian, I have to ask you something. Do you ever regret what you did? Do you ever feel bad for David? I thought about her question while I sipped my coffee. Sarah, I said finally, David made his choices. He chose to leave me for another woman. He chose to try to steal my retirement money. He chose to treat me like I was stupid and helpless. I didn't make those choices for him. I looked out the window at my vegetable garden, where tomatoes and peppers were growing tall and strong. I gave David 15 years of my life. I cooked for him, cleaned for him, supported his dreams, and helped build our future together. And when he decided none of that mattered, when he decided I didn't matter, I had to protect myself. And you don't feel guilty about keeping control of the pension money? I laughed. Sarah, that money represents 15 years of my life too. I worked, I saved, I made sacrifices. David seems to think that because he earned the paychecks, all the money belongs to him. But a marriage is a partnership. I was his partner for 15 years, whether he wants to remember that or not. Sarah smiled. I'm proud of you, Marian. You're stronger than I ever realized. I'm stronger than I ever realized too, I said. It turns out that when people underestimate you, it can actually be an advantage. David thought I was just a quiet librarian who didn't understand money or legal contracts. He never bothered to find out what I was really capable of. And what are you capable of? I looked around my kitchen, at my textbooks, at my new life that I had built for myself. Anything I want, I said. Absolutely anything I want. After Sarah left, I sat at my table working on my homework. It was an essay about women's rights in the early 1900s, and I was writing about how women had to fight for the right to control their own money and property. Some things I thought never change. Women still have to fight to protect themselves sometimes. But the good news is, we're usually smarter and stronger than people think we are. As I wrote my essay, I smiled thinking about David and how surprised he had been that night in my kitchen. He had spent 15 years living with me, and he never realized that I was reading law books and finance books along with everything else. He never realized that quiet doesn't mean stupid. He never realized that kind doesn't mean weak. And he definitely never realized that being underestimated can be the greatest advantage of all. I finished my homework just as the sun was setting outside my kitchen window. Tomorrow I had 3 classes, and this weekend I was going to plant more flowers in my garden. I had plans, dreams, and a future that belonged entirely to me. And David? Well, David had learned an important lesson. Never underestimate a librarian who knows how to read the fine print.